AI is the kind of tech that it'll become universal to anybody and everybody. The biggest difference between AI as a new tech is that it will have the ability of cutting across generations. Here's what I mean by that.
How do you see AI changing our field of hospitality? And do you see a tectonic shift in education?
100%. I mean, AI is changing things as we speak. Any progress you want to see in your country of any form, of any kind, it fundamentally lies in our ability to educate. Today, the data has become bigger and bigger, but the ability to now assimilate that data into something meaningful is easier thanks to AI. And so what can we do with it? Let's say, how do you bring the environment and sustainability into this? Because it's such a big issue. Call it a environmental loyalty card.
Dilip uncle, when you spoke about AI, Anant and I are both running businesses, right? What are some of the tools that you are using to run your enterprise, and what would you advise us to use?
I'll give you an example of what we do. So
What do you look for when you are enrolling a person into ISH?
today, often a number of hotels half jokingly tell me, "Sir, आपके बच्चों को लेने में हमें जरा डर लगता है, ये कुछ ज़्यादा ही ऊंचे लेवल के हैं."
Because the toughest time in your professional career and how you sort of overcame.
Not just me, almost every successful person will tell you that I'm successful because of my failures.
What was that for you?
Should I do the rapid fire this time?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for giving me the honor. One advice to your students and to us for us to wrap up.
Well, I think
The man redefining education in Indian hospitality. From doing the Starwood and Marriott merger in India to founding ISH. We have a dear, we have Dilip uncle with us. Thank you for joining us. And we have his third son, who's my brother, Aryavir, sitting across for this podcast. So please tell us about your journey. All the way from Starwood days to the Taj days, now to founding ISH.
okay. Well, thank you for having me here. The journey as a hotelier actually started 40 years ago. 1984, I graduated from university. I studied economics, so I had a degree in economics from Delhi University, and really didn't know about hotels or had any intent or interest in joining hotels. It just so happened that I knew somebody who was in hotels then, who was a very strong influence in my life at that point, and he used to work for Brij Hotels, and prompted me to apply to get into the what was then called the Oberoi School of Hotel Management, now better known as OCLD. And in those days, I believe they used to have about 10,000 applicants, and they would take about 15 to 20 every year. So this person I knew was very proud of the fact that he'd gotten and almost challenged me कि तू कभी नहीं pass होगा इसमें. And so it was more or less on that basis that I applied, and to my own surprise, I got in. And next I knew, my family, my dad, everybody said, "Ki, what a great idea, and you should go into hotel management." And so I landed up at the Oberoi School, and I think in hindsight, to me, it seemed as if how a fish takes to water. From day one, I entered the portals of the Oberoi School and I knew I was at home. So for me, the industry, hospitality, hotels, it's just innate to who I am, what I am. And I totally believe in that old cliche where they say, you can take me out of hotels, but you can't take the hotelier out of me. So even though I've been an education entrepreneur now for almost 9 years now since I left the hospitality world as a professional, but to myself and to most others, I'm still first seen as a hotelier and then as an educator. I'm trying to change that perception. But when I finished my post-graduation from the Oberoi School, I spent 10 years working for them. And to me, it's almost like saying that my initial years in hospitality were in the cradle of luxury, which is how I look at Oberoi Hotels. I think there's no other brand in India which has truly put our country onto the luxury map globally. It's not just recognized as, the best luxury hotel company in India, but I think very much competes with the biggest players all over the world. So those formative years with Oberoi Hotels in many ways defined my career for the rest of what it was going to be. After that, I spent years working for Intercontinental Hotels. I had a stint with Taj as well. I used to run the Rambagh Palace in your hometown in Jaipur. I went off to Africa and worked in the wilds running luxury game camps and safari lodges. I spent time living and working in Australia with Intercontinental Hotels. In the middle, I also went onto the ownership side of the business. I set up and led a private equity fund which was investing in hotels. This was in those glory days of India shining in the early 2000s. And then finally took on the role of running Starwood Hotels for India and South Asia, which was really what I did till the time Starwood and Marriott merged. My interest in education and higher education and hospitality, I think the seed had already been sown many years ago. When I started my leadership journey as such, I began to see the gaps in the kind of young people coming into our industry versus what was really the need of the industry. I had identified that there's a gap here, and I always told myself, kuch karna chahiye iske baare mein. But I was growing my career. I was an ambitious guy in those days. But the idea kept staying in my mind, and it kept growing over the years. And I said, one day I will do it. And that one day happened when the Starwood-Marriott merger was announced, and I could take that risk and that big leap of faith and quit my corporate career and become an entrepreneur. And here we are 9 years later. ISH is now 8 years, so we've taken our 7th batch. It's been a great journey so far, but I think there's still a long way to go. But to end this part of your question, एक क्रिकेट में एक कहावत होती है, टेस्ट क्रिकेट में, that first innings who scores a century is a good cricketer and the team might win. But जो second innings में century बनाता है, almost always the team wins. And the best cricketers are those. Virat Kohli is a good example, right? Second innings में वो hero बनता है. So when I look at my journey in education, it's my second innings after my first innings, which was my career as a hotelier. And अब तक maybe half century मार चुका, अभी century मारनी बाकी है. So it's a journey which I continue to pursue, and hopefully will truly try and take ISH to be benchmarked as a global equivalent hospitality school in India.
So I think कई सेंचुरियां मार चुके हो आप. I think Starwood was bigger than Marriott in India when you sort of did the merger. And this is the most premier educational institute for hospitality in the country. Which part of your journey was most joyous, and which part was most enjoyable for you? And is there something you wish you'd done differently?
Well, I'd have to say my entire journey as a hotelier was enjoyable in most parts. I think I was fortunate to have the choice to shape my own career than be forced by circumstances to pursue where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. The opportunity to have lived and worked in multiple cities in India, in Australia, in Africa, working across great brands, Oberoi, Taj, Intercontinental, Starwood. I think all of these are privileges I feel very humble about today. I don't think many people get the opportunity to experience what I was able to. And I think it's really that amalgamation of all those experiences, travels, the people I met, the people I worked with. In many ways, any success in my career, when I think about it, I often suffer from what you might call an imposter syndrome. I always wonder that why are people telling me how great you were at doing what you did, or what you did with Starwood, or what you did in the Oberois. And I think to myself, and I struggle to try and see मैंने क्या किया. And then I figure out that perhaps the real and only skill I had which contributed to any success was the ability to put together people who were always smarter than me in what they did.
This is absolutely.
I don't think I would ever have been successful in any of my roles if I didn't have that kind of a team around me. And the effort at building that team was probably the most challenging part of any role I took on. That, God forbid, if I put the wrong person in the job, I'm the one who will be suffering because of it. And so somehow bringing a great set of people together was probably something I did reasonably well. And the success which came, therefore, think of it this way, it was like the reflected glory of their achievements, which would shine off me. Because if you were leading the organization, you did take the credit, right? But I always saw it that this glory is reflecting off the work of other people. And so to me, I think in whatever I've done, even in education, for example, as we were envisioning setting up ISH, I always knew that I've got to get that one guy who knows this business and will know what to do and will complement what I bring to the table or what Prahlad brings to the table in terms of, doing this together. I didn't know education. I hadn't been in the education business, so I knew I needed somebody with expertise in that, in the way the regulatory environment works, in the way in which pedagogy works. All those things were, absolutely Greek and Latin to me. So I said, until I find that person who's going to be able to do this with me, I'm not going to take the risk of doing this. And so it's only when I met Kunal for the first time and we engaged and interacted, Prahlad and I met him together when he worked at another hotel school. And I remember after that meeting, I told Prahlad, I feel more confident and comfortable moving forward if we have somebody like him to work with us. And, he was the first guy I took on board once we had decided to do it. And with him, again, built up a team which really is responsible for whatever good we've done so far. And again, like you guys are saying, you're giving me the credit, but I think it's really having the right people in the right roles.
But Dilip Uncle, from running one of the most successful hotel companies, Starwood in Asia, managing director, to taking that leap into business, it's like it can be extremely intimidating because, in business you have to take care of salaries, you have to take care of compliance, you have to take care. So from being in that position and leaving that cushy situation to starting a business of your own, like, how did you get that courage and take that leap?
Even I still wonder about how I got that courage. The bug about wanting to do this came to me long back while I was very much in my corporate career. So I had a fairly long runway to think through what is required to transition myself from being a corporate professional hotelier into an entrepreneur. It wasn't that I was forced into it one day to the next and was, completely at sea. It took me good 6, 7, 8 years of thinking through it, planning it. All that time, I was still in my corporate job, having a great time doing that, and therefore also had the resources and the ability to research more, to plan this better, to make sure that I've secured the business from a financial perspective, from a regulatory perspective, from branding, partners, alliances. Many of those things I didn't have to wait to turn entrepreneur to do. I'd already thought of those things. If and when I decide I'm going to do this, I'm well prepared for it, which included lining up investors, which was clearly, as you rightly said, probably the most important things, because entrepreneurs typically struggle with cash flow. There is a saying in the entrepreneurial world that top line is vanity, bottom line is sanity, cash flow is reality. And I think any of us who went through COVID as entrepreneurs probably experienced it in a very personal way, as did I. It certainly was a struggle. It wasn't something we had envisaged that, such a significant black swan event was going to happen. We figured that the business could be cyclical. There may be troughs, but nothing as, dramatic as what happened with COVID. And I think to me, and I think to most people who were able to come out of it, it just gave you more resilience. That if I could go through that, I can go through anything. And that was exactly the time at which we brought in new partners. We brought in strategic partners who also invested in our business. Somme Education, who own the brands La Roche, Glion, Ecole de Casse. So actually, as a consequence of COVID, we were far better capitalized. We had great brand partners. They were both strategic partners as well as financial investors in the company. So the struggles of what we went through COVID, we were able to see the fruits of that struggle when we brought in this new partnership, and it's allowed ISH to grow to what you see today. We remain in a very aggressive growth mode even now. We're very keen to look at doing a second campus somewhere in the south of India, ideally in Bangalore. And I think education, when you think about it as, education is part of the social sector, right? So any progress you want to see in your country of any form, of any kind, whether it's the upliftment of poverty or whether it's turning more unicorns or developing more entrepreneurs or growing our economy to 10, 20 trillion dollars, it fundamentally lies in our ability to educate. If you don't have an education, you're not going to be able to do these things. I think the challenge in our country has also been that education is such a highly regulated sector, largely has been traditionally controlled by the government, both school education and college education. It's in the more recent past that you saw more private players coming into the field of education. But today, I think, when was it, 2020, when they announced the new national education policy, it was pretty game-changing, allowing foreign universities to come and set up campuses here, which would just never have even been considered in early years. So many of those changes, making education more multidisciplinary, focusing education, going beyond just the hard technical skills into soft skills, into, the use of adaptive technology. I think these are all things which, at least for us in the field of education, have really positive implications on what we can do in terms of changing our approach towards higher education. I mean, when we were in school and college, if you looked at a teacher, you probably first thought कि और कुछ मिला नहीं होगा करने को तो teacher बन गए हो, right? Whereas today, a big part of what my own personal vision is that, our academic faculty here are in no way less than anybody who works in our industry. We bring in faculty from the industry. We pay them better than the industry does. We don't pay them like you would expect a college teacher to be earning. So it was very important for me to make sure that, you were able to bring in, at the end of the day, however great a institution we've created, all the tech you see here, all the lovely stuff, it won't be worth anything if the people who are actually educating our students, don't come from absolutely the best background. So we have a wonderful mix between practitioners who come from the industry and academics who are professors and PhDs. And I think when you try and harness the skills of practitioners and academics, you can truly deliver cutting-edge learning. Because of our Swiss partners, our pedagogy is completely different. We're not teacher-centric. We are purely learner-centric. It's the student's ability to learn which is more important than my ability to teach. Think of it this way. 15 years ago, even when you guys, young as you are, were in high school or probably even early college, Google Baba nahi the tab. You still thought your professor has the knowledge, so I have to listen to my professor to get the knowledge. Today, that knowledge is available on your fingertips because Google will tell you more than your professor can tell you. So now what changes? How do you educate that kid who always thought कि teacher पढ़ा रहा है, उसके पास ही knowledge है, मुझे सुनना पड़ेगा? Today, I also have the knowledge. So the role of that professor and that teacher has changed from teaching to facilitating learning. What do I mean by that? That I know you have the knowledge, let's say, of the recipe of a dish. I'm just using an example. How can I take that knowledge you have and help you convert it into an actual competency, into a skill, and help you develop a mindset? How is it different to what traditionally higher education is? Today, you still go to the best colleges in India and you ask the professor, what's your job? The professor, if they're a professor of physics or chemistry, will say, my job is to teach that subject. When you ask them, what about the soft skills, social skills, life skills a student needs to also learn? 9 out of 10 of them will say, that's not our job. That either mommy, daddy should have taught you or you go and, find it at a finishing school. For us, at the core of our education is building those kind of skills and mindsets in people. Because today, thanks to the information age we live in, the technical skills are the easiest to learn. You look at our own industry, F&B, front office, opera mein check-in karna, ya how to kind of deliver great service. What's the big deal? It's not a rocket science.
Mechanical.
Very-
As good as flipping burgers.
But now you start thinking about how do you create those memorable experiences? How do you build relationships? How do you develop empathy? How do you nurture and foster? How do you make a customer a lifetime customer? Think of his value across. Those are the kind of things which are far more important. And so what I think we're trying to do here at ISH is to change that mold of traditional education, moving away from just hard technical skills into really developing young people with the right mindsets for the future. You walk around our campus, you will not see any single-use plastic being used here. I challenge you, you can walk around. Now, why is that? It's a good thing to do in any case. Single-use plastic is bad. But that's not the only reason why we don't have single-use plastic. By experiencing over 4 years of their journey in ISH, not seeing single-use plastic and therefore understanding that it's bad, their mindsets towards sustainability and saving the environment no more require them to be put into a classroom and taught ki kyun bura hai, kyun acha hai. It is now a steeped mindset in them that we have to protect and save the environment. So if I've produced that kind of a socially conscious citizen of tomorrow, I think I've done my job. I really don't care whether he goes and works for, Oberoi Hotels or goes and decides to be an entrepreneur. That's what they want to try and do. But have we developed young people with those mindsets to take on the challenges of the future, the changing world we live in, the rapidly changing world we live in, the adaptability towards technological change, towards change in the environment, all those things? I think it is the duty of educators to focus on those areas. And in trying to do those things is what makes what I do today exciting and interesting and different perhaps from what I did as a hotelier.
So how is AI influencing this? And how do you see AI changing our field of hospitality? And do you see a tectonic shift in education, especially for ISH as well, and as an industry as a whole?
100%. I mean, AI is changing things as we speak. If you are today developing a presentation to make a pitch to somebody for anything, I can challenge both of you. You are using ChatGPT or some generative AI to do it. You are. Imagine people like myself or our faculty at ISH, our ability to enhance the value of those tools we use to educate our children and what AI is able to do to help us do that, how AI is able to help us even evaluate and assess our students. It's just mind-boggling. Education is probably the first area in which you are able to tangibly see benefits because, today, by that engagement with a large number of students, you're able to generate ideas, thoughts, things to discuss and talk about through the help of AI like you never could before, right? You take our own industry, for example. I was with a group of people just a couple of days ago who were working on this amazing model where today we agree that the world of luxury hospitality is now more about experiences and memories than about product and service, right? That's almost universally clear and for a variety of reasons. So it's all about hyper-personalization. How do you deliver that? So now you think of a hotel, large hotel, small hotel. It's got a profile of a guest. You look at your arrival list and you'll see how many guests are arriving. Today, if those guests are regulars at your hotel, members of your loyalty program, you already have a significant number of their preferences, likes, dislikes already there internally to you. Add to that the kind of data and information you're able to garner about them from social media, right? Which is in public domain. So you're not infringing on anybody's privacy. It's all there. So now you've been able to profile that individual guest. Now flip it to the hotel. You're able to profile all the products you offer, all the services you offer, all the experiences you offer, all the kind of people you have. Imagine that you also know linguistic capabilities of your employees and are able to map that, saying, okay, there is a Japanese guest coming who doesn't speak or is not comfortable in English, and it would be great to have somebody who speaks his language there. The point I'm trying to make is that AI has helped you profile the guest, and you've told the AI through all the prompting you do as to what are the kind of curative experiences we have to offer out here. And now the AI is going to map those with what the guest needs are and come out for you with 2 or 3 options of you can do something as small as there was one lady guest who was a long stay at a hotel, and it was recorded in her preferences that she likes to sit by the poolside and read a book. So the hotel, using this tech, did something as small as gift her 2 bookmarks because she read books. So somebody just came there and saying, ma'am, you're constantly reading a book, putting it out, then going off for a swim, then coming back and all that. Here's a nice bookmark, right? Now, it's a tiny little experience. My sense is that little touch is something she's more likely to remember in a positive way about your hotel than if you'd given her a free meal.
Absolutely. 100%.
Right. So when you start looking at these kind of ways in which you can hyper-personalize experiences for your guests using AI, it's but one example of what can be done. Let's say, how do you bring the environment and sustainability into this? Because it's such a big issue, especially for our future generations, for your generations. Today, all of us in hotels, we practice sustainability, right? You have those little cards saying you want to reuse the towel, keep it out to dry. If you don't want your linen changed, so they're trying to save on laundry detergents. Today, you have intelligent systems which sense guest is in the room or not. Temperatures get adjusted. All those kind of good things are all there. That's in-stay in your hotel. Think of a universal, call it a environmental loyalty card. I'm just using it as an example. And I say universal, it's like UPI. Everybody has UPI today. So everybody has this card. Doesn't matter if you're a hotel traveler or if you're traveling in a bus or if you're eating in a restaurant, if you're using an airline. Doesn't matter. You have a card. And every time you're doing something which genuinely is reducing your carbon footprint. As an example, you're traveling from Jaipur to Delhi for an event and decide not to take a flight but to drive in an EV. It's reasonably measurable as to how much of your footprint you've reduced. So the moment you put a measurable metrics on that what did you use to travel to get to the hotel? Did it contribute to sustainability? A certain number of points get calculated and that goes on your card. When you check into the hotel and you do all these good things about, okay, don't change my linen and don't change my towels and, I'll switch off my lights and all that, you're earning points. So anything and everything you're doing which in some way impact, you're buying a product which is organic versus a product which is processed, you're able to earn points. So you're being rewarded for practicing sustainability. So it's a win for you. In the hotel's case, the fact that we're not washing your linen every day or we're saving power because you are intelligent enough to let the room know we're saving money, we're saving costs, we're becoming more efficient. The environment is getting saved in some way. So it's a win-win-win for everybody. Imagine if all of this can come together through harnessing the power of AI, where seamlessly there's one card. And why in India? Anywhere in the world, there should be one universal card. And it's actually getting it's in our nature to want to be rewarded for what we do. इसलिए लोग loyalty programs में जाते हैं कि मैं earn करूंगा और मैं खर्च करूंगा. Think of this card in the same way. Well, I wish there was a student project I saw which inspired me about an idea like this. We were facilitating a global project where hotel schools were being asked to present ideas for 2030s in terms of where hotels will be with tech. And one of the student groups came out with this idea. And I promised them then, I said, I would love to work on this sometime in the future. So when Nandan Nilekani designed the universal Aadhaar and all that, we are able to harness all that big data. Surely we can do it with this also.
Wow.
Today, it's the ability. Today, the data has become bigger and bigger, but the ability to now assimilate that data into something meaningful is easier thanks to AI. And so what can we do with it? These are the ideas of the future, which I think when you work with young people who are in their formative years. Don't forget, human beings continue their mental development till the age of 25. That's science-backed. You may physically reach your peak by 21, 22, kya height ke honge and kya foot size hoga tomorrow and all that, more or less. But your cognitive abilities still develop till the age of 25. Then, more or less, your final character is shaped.
So then it's all downhill.
Well, then it's about what you do with that, right? Depending on the personality and character you've created or you become at that age. And so for us in higher education, we are a part of that young person's life in that most formative stage when they're truly developing their characters and persona of who they'll be in the future. And I think that's a big responsibility on us as educators. And to me, that's simply what I want to harness out of young people. When we set them out on their paths in the world after their higher education, if nothing else, they are more socially conscious than we were.
Dilip uncle, when you spoke about AI, Anant and I are both running businesses, right? What are some of the tools that you are using to run your enterprise, and what would you advise us to use? How do you measure from a business angle? You mentioned unit level experiences for the units, but let's say from the corporate.
So at a business level, I'll give you an example of what we do. So our business is to enroll students, right? Students have direct channels through our websites and all that to look at us. Most often they look digitally and they will do a keyword search about higher education, hospitality, whatever, and we'll pop up, and that's how it happens. So at the top of the funnel, if I want to finally have a target that I want to get 100 students, and just using a number, my top of the funnel, where the leads come in, to get 100 students, must be about 10,000 at least. Okay, that's the historical trend in terms of conversions because many of those leads are unqualified. Then you have to qualify them. From that top of the funnel, how do you start qualifying those leads? Traditionally, that lead means you got a name, you got an email, you got a mobile number. Somebody then calls up, "Sir, I'm calling from ISH. Are you interested in our courses? Aapne wo diya tha." And you find that for whatever reason, that person not qualified. So you begin to qualify those leads and the funnel becomes narrower. So between that top of the funnel to keep filtering out, today, what is the need for intervention by somebody calling somebody? Today, we use, which you could call them AI, a bot, essentially, when that unqualified lead comes, based on these three criteria, they scour the internet and all the social media channels to say, who is this person? And they are able to do that same screening and filtration of that unqualified lead into a qualified lead way better than you or me making a call and trying to find out, and imagine the inefficiencies in being able to do that. So something like that, which is critical to us, right? Our business is students. We want to enroll more students. We want a more qualified pipeline. We want a pipeline where we can convert a larger percentage of the qualified leads into actual conversions into students. And so that whole process is managed more efficiently through AI. So that's just one of the examples. Today, even in the use of tools of education for example, I think in the next couple of years, PowerPoint would have died a natural death. Absolutely. Right? People are using Canva and people are using all kinds of other tools. Whereas forever we thought, PowerPoint is the most powerful tool to present, right? That's what it was created for. So today, in terms of the same faculty sitting down to develop content for a particular module, a particular course, a new case study is being developed, designed. The ability to work with generative AI and get better content is so much more enhanced today. You can cut down the amount of time you take on your research by a significant amount by just putting the narrative out to ChatGPT and saying, give me options of, if this was your idea. So for example, in that case of the hotel, it's AI where the assistant was created based on the fact that the mission of that assistant is to map a profile of a guest with the profile of what the hotel has to offer and to find the best curative experiences to deliver hyper-personalization. That was the brief. And based on that, they spent many hours putting in the right prompts. So today, the kind of output that they get from that, it's cut down the amount of work they have to do so significantly.
We have some interns from your school, and I can say that they come with a set of skills that don't exist or didn't exist in the current system, including me. So I can say that
I'm
this is
glad to hear
actually
that.
happening.
I'm very happy to hear that. But that's the mold out of which we have to break. Traditionally, higher education, India has always had a very good school level education system, largely driven by, well, it's counterintuitive. We call them public schools, but they're private schools. But our high school education system, certainly compared to many systems in the West, has always been good. But the moment it comes to higher education, colleges, universities, if you take away the limited number of IITs and those kind of institutions, what do we have? Nothing. I mean, till 10 years ago, we didn't have Ashoka University like universities here. We should have had them 50 years ago, right? So I think for me, a big part of envisioning ISH was disrupting higher education. And I think being disruptive to me meant exactly what you're saying is, how do I produce young graduates who are out of that mold? In the classical hotel management system, you were taught front office, housekeeping, food and beverage, production. At a basic level, some intermediate level, और कुछ सिखाया नहीं था. And none of that was relevant to the changing industry. Industries moved ahead, tech has come in, newer processes have come in, customer behaviors have changed. वही पढ़ा रहे जो 50 साल पहले पढ़ा रहे थे. For us, almost, it's a challenge for the faculty pretty much every semester. What's new in the same module which you delivered last year? If it was somebody teaching digital marketing, she will completely change the case study she used last year. Whereas in traditional institutions, the same case study is used for 20 years. Here, because so much of our faculty comes from the industry, we have access to the industry. So we're constantly talking to them, क्या बदल गया है? तुम क्या अलग कर रहे हो? हमें बताओ. Because we have to make sure that our students are ready for that. And that's why you'll see that, our students going out. Today, often a number of hotels half jokingly tell me, सर आपके बच्चों को लेने में हमें ज़रा डर लगता है, ये कुछ ज़्यादा ही ऊंचे लेवल के हैं. Because they're used to taking, 100 interns from an IHM system. And they said, you have 5 or 10 of your guys out there and they stand out like black sheep out there because, for example, because we have a live opera training module here. And so in the first year itself, they go through that training module. So pretty much when they go into a hotel for internship, they're ready to physically check in a guest. But the hotel's attitude is, तू trainee है, तू वो कोने में खड़े रह के observe कर. Guest से मत बात करना, computer को मत छूना. And here is a kid finishing his first year telling them, but sir, I've learned all this. आप break पे जाइए ना, मैं कर लूँगा. And so now hotels who are steeped in that, कि ऐसा ही था, they said, आपके बच्चे थोड़े ज़्यादा ही smart हैं. Maybe we are not the right environment for them to intern in. It's become like that. And unfortunately, many of our students, for them, working in hotels is not the first choice of career because they're not being educated to work in just hotels. An ISH graduate ideally should have 10 to 12 different careers to choose from. They can work in hospitality, they can work in luxury retail, in real estate, in e-commerce, in tech, in startups, in healthcare. There's so many opportunities. Wherever a business has customer centricity, an ISS student is able to work in that environment. So when you give them those 10 choices, the hotel is not their first choice. Particularly when they say, tum operations mein jao. And to compound that challenge, as an industry, historically, we've been very proud of being overworked and underpaid. We used to wear it as a badge of honor. यार हम तो 12-14 घंटे करते ही हैं काम. We're such hardworking guys. And हाँ यार, होटल में इतनी तनख्वाह मिलती है. It is the way we grew up, at least my generation, certainly. Now, you put that young Gen X kid into that, and he'll say, seriously? I have no desire to go and work in an industry where I have to work 12 hours a day and I'm being paid less than if I went and worked somewhere else. Today, for that young student of ours, the first question is not what salary I'll get. The first question they want answered is, will I have fun? Will I learn? Will I grow? That's what's more important to them in looking for jobs. The concept of job loyalty, job security, gai bhar mein. There's no concept that does not exist in the lexicon of this generation. And as an industry, we've just not been able to adapt to that change, that huge demographic change with this generation demands. Imagine, Karo, we do a lot of management training programs for corporates also here, for many of big brands. And they've come back to us and said, now we're producing such smart young managers, but the managers they are going to go and report to, अगर वो वही पुराने ख्यालात के हैं, who are telling them कि जब मैं तुम्हारी उम्र का था, मैं 12 घंटे काम कर रहा था, तुम भी करो. You think that kid's going to stay with that organization? So where is your problem with attrition? It lies in this inability in our own industry for our senior management who come from a different generation to still think that these young kids must go through life the way we went through life. It doesn't make any sense to this generation. And so now we spend a lot of our time training managers, middle managers, senior managers of the same companies to say if we are taking in such smart young people, we better have smart managers to manage them, otherwise they're not going to stay with us.
So 2-3 things we were at a panel discussion before this at the university. This was the last day of your graduating batch. So I don't remember attending any of these when I was in university. The fact that they were there and they were curious, so there were multiple panels and they sat through all the panels was amazing. And some of them said that I wish this was at least 1 or 2 years more. This is how much they loved it. And my question to you was, because in the day of AI, curiosity, I think, is the biggest sort of quality which anyone should have. Like today, like I've done finance and economics, but Ari could probably give me a better answer through just putting it on ChatGPT. He's from a hotelier background. So how do you generate that curiosity in the team, in the students of ISH? And other than that, what do you look for when you are enrolling a person into ISH?
So, the curiosity bit, I think this generation is naturally more curious. When you have access to so much of information and all kinds of information, the biggest danger of that is it can confuse you. If you imagine an 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid is reading information about something which is got two sides to the coin, right? Could be a geopolitical issue. So he's reading about who's doing the right thing, then somebody else is giving another perspective. Ye to galat hai.
And the parents.
Imagine parents se kuch aur wo aa raha hai, doston se kuch aur aa raha hai, teacher se kuch aur aa raha hai. Where you would think ki itna information se to tumko you should make the right, you shouldn't get, but they get confused. I've always looked at that and said confusion is good. So long as you are able to then filter all what you heard, and then through that filtration process, you're able to get some clarity on what the reality is. Now think about how AI can help them do that. So again, you're inputting into ChatGPT as an example, that the Russia-Ukraine war as an example, and you're hearing about whether Russia is doing the right thing or Ukraine is doing the right thing, or both are doing the wrong thing, or what is America doing, or what is Europe doing, or what is India's stand. There are hundreds of different things you've read. वो सारे जो है assimilate करके you tell ChatGPT, these are all the various points of view. You please summarize, filter out, and tell me what's reality in this and what's just pure conjecture or just pure extremist fanatical views on this, right? So the idea is to encourage young people, because they are naturally curious, that your curiosity can be clarified by more effective use of AI. But don't also forget, एक पुरानी कहावत है ना, curiosity killed the cat. Ignorance brought it back. So sometimes it's better to hear, know everything, and to the outside world assume that I'm ignorant of these things, because otherwise you get sucked into having a point of view. And because you're not sure of what that point of view is, or that point of view has to be developed by very superficial knowledge, which you're getting through all these various sources on social media, you yourself don't know whether you have a precise point of view on something. I'd rather not comment or opine on something than have to say something and then have to defend it, and I don't have adequate knowledge about it to defend. And because you're a young kid, nor do you have any solid experience to back you up. So it's great on the one side that you may have more knowledge than generations older than you, but you certainly cannot compare their experience with what you have. And truly to be finding yourself more evolved than your peers, you have to combine your knowledge and information along with experience. I always tell young people, my own son included, I said, yeah, don't deny the fact that you have more knowledge or information than I could ever have because, you've grown up in a generation which is information oriented. But I said, you will never be able to compete with me for the experience I have. And if I take knowledge from you and use my experience, I'm likely to offer a better solution than just your knowledge will. Even that doesn't shut him up, but at least it's an effort being.
But I agree with you. Like sometimes if I am on ChatGPT on a certain topic I want to know, it just kind of sucks you in. You just go on and on. You keep asking it questions and it keeps giving you stuff. And you don't know sometimes when to stop. So I think at that point in time, somebody who has the experience you can reflect on that topic with them to understand where is the balance.
The biggest difference between AI as a new tech is that it will have the ability of cutting across generations. Here's what I mean by that. My mother, who's 90 years old, her grandson said, what do I gift my grandmother for her birthday? And he says, I will gift her the understanding of how to use AI to overcome her loneliness. Because my mother always says, I'm lonely. Even if for half an hour she has to sit by herself and nobody around her, she'll crib and say, I'm lonely. And everybody can't be sitting around her 24 hours. So he said, I'll tell her how to have a conversation with ChatGPT. So what does Dadi enjoy? Playing bridge. So why don't I now train up ChatGPT and prompt her sitting with Dadi and saying, ask about any new convention or show me a hand where you can do this, because she plays bridge online herself as well. So imagine now a 90-year-old where she doesn't have to type, she just has to speak. The biggest fear for the older generation is, type karne mein mere ko nahi aata hai karna. I can speak. Now AI allows you to speak, right? So imagine overcoming the loneliness of an elderly person by having the AI almost as a companion to them.
Absolutely.
अकेलापन महसूस आ रहा है, बात करो AI से, पूछो, ब्रिज खेलो उसके साथ.
My nanny is 88, 87, 88, and she is on every single technology platform. She's using ChatGPT and Meta AI on her WhatsApp.
So that's the point I'm making, that AI in particular as a technology is going to transcend generations. And therefore it's here to stay and do things which no other technology in the past could have been able to do. Normally you associate new tech with young people. Older people are finding it difficult to adapt to tech. But AI is the kind of tech that it will become universal to anybody and everybody.
One thing which sort of only you and Raj Menon have experienced, two of the largest companies in the world, merging in India. I would love for you to share your experience. So many mergers, so much happening. There was Fern Marriott, there was Shribo Accor. I'm sure there are many, many more coming on the anvil. So can you tell us the challenges which you went through and the learnings from that?
Well, firstly, Starwood-Marriott was more of an acquisition than a merger. It's nice to call it a merger because technically you could say it was a merger because Starwood shares were merged with Marriott. But let there be no doubt that Marriott acquired Starwood. In the other examples you used, that's neither a merger nor an acquisition. That's a marketing alliance or partnership. Even though some money may have exchanged hands, there is really no change of control, or there's really no significant change from a owner shareholding perspective, all of that kind of stuff. So they are quite different. In the Starwood-Marriott case, what really happened was these were two of the largest hotel companies, right? Marriott globally was way larger. In Asia Pacific and in India, Starwood was bigger in terms of the number of properties it operated and had in a pipeline. So the two companies were fundamentally not very different. They all had a set of brands, both of them US based, both of them traded on the New York Stock Exchange, both of them public companies, both of them had brands playing in different market segments, right? So from what the merger and acquisition was meant to achieve, yes, the synergies of both of them coming together would result in significant efficiencies in a merged organization. Clearly, shareholder value was the true reason why a merger and acquisition takes place. You want to enhance shareholder value at the end of the day and making sure that you're bringing in synergies, efficiencies, all those kind of things in how you operate your businesses. So in the India case, it was, we had a lot of common owners. There were owners who owned Starwood Hotels or branded hotels. There were owners who owned Marriott branded hotels. So there were owners who knew both the companies. We didn't operate very differently. We had our loyalty programs. We had our distribution. We had many things which we did in the same way. We were, I think Raj loves to use this term, we were frenemies. We were friends outside of our work, and we competed, in our business. We both went to the same owners to sign our brands. But because our structures weren't fundamentally different, the ability to integrate the organizations was much stronger. There was very little resistance in synergizing both our businesses, certainly in South Asia, the market which I was responsible for, but broadly in the entire world also. Yes, obviously, one is an acquired company, so there aren't going to be places for two bosses in the same role. All of those things were debated, decided, agreed upon way before the merger was actually happening. Not that I knew anything about it, but this is how companies plan. That, they'd put the two organizations on a big chart and say, okay, who's staying from where, who's better at what, this, that, and they'll create a new organization. But I think full credit to Marriott, they just went about doing it in a very good way. When it came to people, when it came to the brands, when it came to the owners, they had a plan in place. It was not a plan which had to be done immediately or there was like an immediacy about it. It was all planned out. In 1 year's time, we'd have integrated this. In 2 years' time, we'd integrate this. In 3 years' time, we'd integrate this. So if you recollect, they didn't integrate the loyalty programs till at least 2 years after the merger happened. SPG continued to be SPG. Marriott Rewards at that time, what it was called, remained there. And they took 2 years to integrate it and then create Bonvoy. And look at what a success Bonvoy has been. They took the best out of SPG, which is one of the reasons I think they acquired Starwood, because the program was so powerful. I think the big reason for them to acquire Starwood was the power of some of the brands like W, brands like Westin. These were like, brands I think which Marriott respected and would have wanted as a part of their portfolio as well. When you plan something like this effectively and then you are able to execute it on the ground, it becomes so much easier to do. So there was no disruption for any of our hotels. A Sheraton or a Westin remained a Sheraton or a Westin. It now is owned by Marriott. It used to be owned by Starwood. General managers' jobs were not threatened at all. Nobody at property levels had any reason. If anything, for the property level people, it was very exciting because suddenly you're working for such a large organization, so your own opportunities for growth and development and promotion get so much more enhanced. Marriott was much better in promoting Indian talent and taking Indian talent out of India. They gave Indian managers lots of opportunities to go and work abroad. Today, you look at the overall Marriott system, they have a lot of Indians in their properties, not just in Asia, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in US, because they harnessed and developed talent to export to the rest of the world, right? So for most people who stayed on in the merged entity, it was a lot more opportunity as a consequence of being a part of something much bigger than we both individually were. So in my books, having been a part of it and seen it in a market like India, I think the way the whole process was carried out and how the companies got merged and integrated, full credit to Marriott for doing that.
So how do you see the hospitality landscape changing in India from a development point of view? Because we've seen that the major brands, Marriott, Hilton, IHG, were all tier 1 city-centric, larger hotels. Now everybody is moving more towards tier 2, tier 3, even smaller inventory. What they would be signing 5 years ago, wouldn't have happened now. So what do you see in the development journey of these brands?
I think it's going to be a real challenge. I mean, big hotel company, its single-minded purpose is to grow. It's the only way you're going to keep returning value to your shareholders, by demonstrating growth. Growth means pipeline, new hotels signed, all of that. So now when you see that the big tier 1 markets are getting compressed little by little, Bombay has always been a high compression market, but other big tier 1 markets are more or less, it's too expensive to build hotels anymore. There's no real estate available. Combine that with largely post-COVID, but even before that, the rise of the domestic traveler. Whether the domestic traveler is traveling for business or for leisure, for both purposes. But today, in India, within India, trips, as they call it, to use what MMT uses, there are over 1 billion trips being taken a year.
Wow.
Now, where are those trips originating from and where are they going to? They're not just going between Delhi and Bombay or Bombay and Bangalore anymore, right? 2010, 15 years ago, not even that long ago, I'll give you the example of a city like Indore. Indore, I started traveling there in 2007-8 when I was with Duet Hotels. We were looking to buy land, build in tier 2 markets. There used to be, I think, 2 flights a day from Delhi. And there were probably 2 flights from Bombay and 1 flight from Calcutta. Yahi tha Indore mein, airport mein. Today, if I'm not wrong, Indore has close to 25 to 30 flights every day, both ways. Delhi se hi, I think there are 7, 8 flights. Good tier 2 market, Indore as a city, right? In those days, the first branded hotel had opened, which was Radisson. Otherwise, they had one Sayaji hotel there, और एक Fortune होता था वहां पर. Today, almost every brand is in Indore.
Yeah, we have 3.
You have 3. Marriott has, I think, 3 or 4 hotels out there. सारे लोग पहुंच गए वहां पर. Why does this happen? You have to look at the entire ecosystem. Hotel development typically follows airline capacity. So you see where the airline's flying. And then logic tells you कि बंदा वहां जा रहा है तो रहेगा भी तो कहीं, तो होटल बनाओ. World over, do you know how, like Intercontinental is a great example. How did that brand get created? It got created by Pan American Airways because Pan Am used to fly to Latin America. I'm talking about the 50s, just after World War II. And they flew to all the capitals of the various South American cities. And they said, now if you're taking Americans there on holiday, where are they going to stay? And if they're traveling business class and first class, then they need a luxury hotel. So Intercontinental as a brand was created by Pan American for that.
Wow.
That's an early example.
It's still kind of...
And over the years, many hotel brands were acquired and created and then sold by airlines. Meridian was created and owned by Air France when it first started, right? So that trend has always been there, that follow the airline. If you want to build a hotel, hotel developers always look at airline capacity. Even today, you look at any feasibility study which comes across, they'll give you airline capacity to tell you कि sir market strong hai. When they're trying to tell you what will be your stabilized occupancy, they'll look at airline seat capacity as a big factor in that. So in India, you look at the number of airports which have come up, you look at the road connectivity which has come up, you look at the access into these kind of tier 2, 3, 4 towns and all that. Logically, obviously, they are where the growth is going to happen. Which is also why, I think a point you made earlier, why the big hotel chains are now willing to even franchise their mid-scale brands in these 2, 3. They don't want to manage them. It'll be a bigger problem for them to manage a 50, 60 room hotel in, I don't know, some Mufassal town, wherever hotels are being written in Batinda or Bareilly or wherever it is. So they have to grow. They're not finding any more growth in tier 1 markets because the market's saturated. There's no land available for people to build. So they're all going there, and they're all competitors to guys like you who are good, strong, homegrown brands who should be really developing the hotels there. Because in the US, it's like that. There are lots of regional, very strong players.
Yes.
Each state might have a little chain of themselves, which you've got, the Drury Inn or this inn or that inn somewhere only in the state of Texas or only in Missouri. So my point is that this growth of hotels taking place in 2, 3, 4, 5 markets is in many ways good for the overall industry. I think in those kind of markets, homegrown Indian brands will have an advantage over the international brands. International brands' primary power is to bring in distribution, right? Today, for the domestic traveler, yes, the loyalty part is still important. कि भाई मैं Bonvoy का member हूँ तो मैं वहाँ जाके रहूँगा. But the ability to operate that 50-room hotel with the kind of efficiencies you guys can operate that 50-room hotel, the foreign operator is simply unable to do. The overhead costs, just putting in an IT system into a branded hotel, the kind of levels of salaries that are expected out there, the kind of brand standards which have to be met. I think Indian brands have to leverage really that opportunity, saying we can operate your hotel and deliver a higher EBITDA margin than any other foreign brand can. And all this you're hearing about soft brands and buy this and distribution and all of that, you have no influence or impact on how that hotel is operated. That is still, the guy who owns and runs it himself. He's just bought your soft brand because it gives him distribution opportunities, which otherwise are too expensive for him to...
and loyalty. Yeah.
It's mainly that. But from a consumer's perspective, at the end of the day, finally, it is when you go and stay in the hotel and experience it is where, you're going to come back to or not. Now there, I can't understand how that hotel, which is now carrying a soft brand of a big foreign brand, is going to be delivering anything different or superior.
Nothing different.
Nothing at all, right? But I think Indian brands, with their innate understanding of the Indian traveler in those markets, you already have experience of operating in those small markets. To many of the big boys, they're new into those markets, right? It'll be a struggle for them to find people to go and work in those hotels, right? So I think there is going to be future growth only in those markets, but I'd also like to, at least I believe that the Indian homegrown brands will have a stronger opportunity and will be able to compete more effectively with the big boys in the smaller markets of India than they could in the tier 1 market.
So one question which sort of, you're working with Prahlad. So what is it that you've learned from him? One thing which you've learned from him. And
well, I've learned a hell of a lot from him. I think Prahlad has always had this startup mentality about him. He gets very excited to do new things. And when we were envisioning ISH, I tell you, there were so many times when I would wake up in the morning in a cold sweat saying, what the hell am I doing? Should I be doing this? I don't know anything about this. And he would be the one who'd always tell me, isn't that what's fun, Dad? That we're doing something, we're in uncharted water, you don't know. 30 years of your life, you did things which you knew the back of your hand. तुम वही करते जाते, तो तुम्हें क्या मजा आता versus doing something. So he would always boost my morale whenever I felt down about saying, really, this entrepreneurship, not for me, I can't do it. And all entrepreneurs have their ups and downs in terms of, whether they think
absolutely self-doubt.
What you're doing is right or not. But Prahlad always kept me grounded in those early days of ISH. So that was very infectious. And in many ways, I'll say that it was, largely his confidence and his engagement, involvement that made this exciting for me as well. And again, because of the generation you guys come from, so much more easily adaptable to tech, how to use tech in terms of design and creating the infrastructure we have here. So much of what you see in terms of our design look feel is largely his ideation and not so much mine. So I think we were able to complement each other really well in terms of leveraging my experience and his enthusiasm to kind of come together with, I think, Kunal balancing both of us in terms of what's the real need. So Prahlad would have these great ideas about design and tech to use, and I would be thinking about how's this going to work with the industry. And Kunal was always there to keep it grounded and saying, hey, we're a college at the end of the day. We have to educate India degree students or degree deni hoti hai. So I think all of these things came together, but with Prahlad and me, it was a total tag team effort. I'd give him as much credit as I take for myself to creating this.
So, and at any point you said that you're fed up and you're like, either you do it or I'm doing it.
So, that's an important point, and I don't know if both of you have experienced that, Ari, you may have. Somewhere when your son, technically he worked for me, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I was the boss.
Yeah.
So that divide between where the father-son relationship ends and the boss-subordinate relationship starts, I think those boundaries, it took time for us to define them. In the early days, he would be naturally saying, that I'm the boss's son, so I'm the boss too. Whereas I would say, I think you need to earn that rather than just think that you're entitled to it. And at the same time, in terms of as we were building our teams, so we had a few rocky patches, but nothing we couldn't work out. I think, Prahlad was a kid who was more mature for his age forever. And so it took time, but we got through it. But I would caution entrepreneurs who get into family businesses, father, son, trying to start something together, where these boundaries need to be understood and respected, where the father-son relationship happens at home, at work. It should be very clearly, because the rest of the team is looking at you. Everybody wants to know what's happening with the boss, right? It's the best gossip you can ever have is to talk about what's happening with the boss in their personal
challenge
lives.
with family businesses as well in general. Because it's not just the father. It could be the brother.
Yeah.
It could be the.
Yeah.
It could be.
Thank God in my case, both the kids aren't working in the business.
Yes.
And I was very clear about that. I said only one of them. And Arjun, luckily, decided he wants to live in Amsterdam rather than here. So if both of them worked for me, I fear that the sibling rivalry would have been a real challenge for me to manage.
I have grown up literally in your house since I was 6, 7.
You've seen their sibling rivalry with
Arjun
their
and
kids.
Prahlad used to be fighting like
Cats and dogs.
cats and dogs.
Yeah.
And I was in the middle, just terrified.
Yeah.
Oh my God, can you stop this?
Yeah.
Like a referee. So, I'm
Mind you,
I'm glad that he's in Netherlands. I'm glad that Prahlad is there.
yeah, mind you, their relationship has evolved. They're best buddies
I
now.
know,
But
I know.
indeed, that was always a concern that the siblings would have their rivalry, and their rivalry, the last thing you want is for the rivalry to be for dad's attention or anything to do with work. It would have been an absolute nightmare. So I'm glad only one of them works with me.
So the boss you admire most, and why?
So I think our global CEO in Starwood was a gentleman called Fritz Van Passion. I think I would say that out of all the people I've had the privilege of working with, I greatly admire Mr. P.R.S. Oberoi as well. I learned hoteliering through him and the institution of Brij Hotels. But Fritz was a really interesting boss. Firstly, with Fritz, it was that he was always the smartest guy in the room. He did his MBA from Harvard, and he loves to tell the story that he's almost apologetic about it. Because he says, I don't know what I learned there. Just having that MBA from Harvard got him into Boston Consulting and then McKinsey and then all the great stuff. He worked for Nike. He's worked for Coors Beer. He was CEO. He worked for Disney. He worked for some of the greatest brands in the world before he became Starwood CEO. But I tell you, he had this aura about him where you knew that he was just so sharp and so smart. His understanding of technology, his understanding of design, his understanding of business, of markets, of things were second to none. And when I was planning ISH, he was almost like a mentor to me. And when I told him I want to do this, he says, just make sure you don't quit Starwood till you're ready to do this. And you'll have all my support, anything you need. And so imagine the comfort it gave me in building up towards doing ISH when your global CEO is saying, we'll support you in doing this. And even when I then quit and started setting this up, he was our mentor. He came every year at his own cost, spent a week with us here, would love engaging with students. And, that kind of mentoring which he was able to do for me, I don't think ISH would ever have been as successful if I didn't have somebody like him. So he's somebody I greatly admire. Mr. Oberoi was somebody who I think you meet anybody who's from the Oberois will always have a story about him. But there are things we learned from him which become almost imbibed into who we are today. In hospitality, in our industry, they say you can normally make out a Oberoi guy from a mile. Because when you go through the school, honestly, you pretty much come out of it like an assembly line. You walk alike, you talk alike, you look alike, you dress alike, you relate alike. We're just molded in that way, in literally how an Oberoi manager needs to be seen by our guests. And because that happens when you're young, and I said, that's when the mindset comes in, so that true, what you call, when hoteliers refer to gravitas, वो जो style होता है, वो सब उनसे सीखने को मिला. And in those days, of course, we would always wear it so proudly on our sleeve, and any other hotel chain, the only two chains in those days used to be Oberoi and Taj. And we clearly thought that we were way ahead of the curve than any of those guys were.
I think all of you had a chip on your shoulder.
We all did. And we do till today.
Yeah.
Very proudly so. I mean, within the ISH faculty, I think 5, 6, 7 of us are
OCLD.
all OCLD backgrounds. I mean, if all things are equal between two candidates, I'll take the guy who went to the Oberoi school. So yeah.
But being an association with Summit, I'm a Gleon alumni.
Yes, you are.
And, I see some similarity when it comes to the influence that they may have had or may have in this institute as well. So how do you adapt, let's say, Swiss education to the Indian palate? Is there something that you have to adapt?
Very much. I think I mentioned this earlier. Our entire pedagogy is different to what a traditional hotel school in India or any university in India would, where I said we are totally learner-centric. We're not teacher-centric. The learning outcome must be very evident before you go out to start teaching a student. A big part of the pedagogy is that if you think of a class of 50 students and you try and put them on a bell curve, probably they'll be the top 10, 15 percentile who are the smarter guys. A larger number who are the, middle of the, and then there'll be some laggards at the end of it. In classical education, professor would teach thinking all 50 of you have the same level of understanding, and so I teach it, which is not the case, right? So what would happen then? Some kids would get it and some wouldn't get it. And the guys who wouldn't get it would never get it because they never had the opportunity to have it taught to them in the way in which they could learn the concept, right? In our pedagogy, the facilitator will teach a concept, will then ascertain how many of you got the concept. Assuming that top 10, 15 percentile got it, and the bulk of the people in the middle kind of got it but could kind of use some brushing up, and there were some guys who didn't get it. Instead of the professor saying, okay, I'll explain it again, you do what's called peer-to-peer learning. The smart 10% of guys who got it, students, if you ask them to explain it to the ones who didn't get it, the ones who didn't get it are far likely to understand it from you than from me as the professor. Otherwise, they would have got it from me the first time itself. Because you are speaking in a language they understand. You're explaining it in the way you understood it. I don't know how your generation thinks better than you do. So you have got the concept. You're far better equipped to teach it now to you than I am to teach it once again to say, दूसरी बार पढ़ाऊंगा तो तू समझ जाएगा. Chances are you won't. So that is how our approach to pedagogy is: a huge amount of peer-to-peer learning and total centricity on the student and how are they able to learn. So today, when you think about what a professor does, he comes, पुराने दिनों में तो व्हाइट बोर्ड पे चौक पे कुछ करता था, अब पावर पॉइंट दिखा के कुछ सिखाता है. Instead, whatever is required for you to understand as a theory, कुछ theorem है मैथ्स का या कुछ केस है, वो that's now almost always what we call a pre-read. It's not something we're going to talk about in class. I'll give you the case up ahead. It should give you enough time to what I call democratize the class. That all of you come into the class with hopefully the same level of understanding of what we're going to be discussing, that particular theory or that particular subject or that particular case or whatever it is. So now it cannot be said कि तुम्हें नहीं समझ में आएगा या तुम्हें समझ में आएगा. You are all expected to have at least read the book. The purpose of the class now is no more to give you that knowledge, because that knowledge was available on Google. I gave you the link. You should have done the pre-read, right? Now we'll use the opportunity of the classroom session to enter into a debate, a discussion, clarification, thoughts coming out of it, curiosity being expressed out of it. Ye kyun hai, ye wo. That is the purpose of learning today. It is not to say ki I'll take something and spend an hour telling it to you in class, which you could have easily just got out of the internet and done it yourself. What a waste. So how effectively do you use the classroom time, face-to-face time with the student, which is meant now for debate, contrasting points of views, different kind of options in terms of solutions to it, all of that. You're truly harnessing the curiosity of the students. You're encouraging them to ask questions by which their learnings will be amplified. Versus the time when you said कि ये PowerPoint है, इस पे इतने सारे numbers हैं, तुम ये सब रट लो या सीख लो. Now we're saying that all that stuff you should have read and understood beforehand. The classroom is not for that. It's very valuable time of the professor and yours in the class to waste upon going through something which you could easily have read through much before or you can read after.
So since your students will be seeing this and they're all, I think, between 21 and 26, 27 maybe, they'll be going through a lot of ups and downs in their lives, in their professional career. Can you take them through extremely or the toughest time in your professional career and how you sort of overcame it?
We do it all the time, Anant. I think not just me, almost every week we will have industry leaders come and talk to students of all kinds, not just hotel leaders, all kinds of leaders. And most of them come and talk about their life journeys, about, their experiences, how they've reached where they have, their success factors. And I tell you, almost every successful person who comes and speaks will tell you that I'm successful because of I failed. I'm successful because of my failures. The other day I was interviewing a gentleman who's created, what are Viva Foods?
Yeah, we were there for it.
You were there for the session.
Yes, of course, Viraj.
With Viraj. So how he failed in his restaurant business. हाँ, वो pocket खाली कर दिया उसका. But it was that failure which in many ways gave him the confidence to be successful with what he did with Viva. You take most successful people's careers and they'll come out with some of the failures which gave them the learnings. Mostly even the tech entrepreneurs, so many of them have failed in this thing.
What was that for you?
I think one of the areas I failed in, as I said, prior to Starwood, I used to work in private equity, right?
So,
we'd raised a lot of capital. We were
yes.
developing and building hotels. And I never had the strength to handle the environment associated with real estate development. The murkiness and the, kind of things you do in real estate. I hadn't planned for those things. My background, coming from a middle-class Fauji family, never exposed to any of that, had no kind of, it just psyched me out. It scared me. Saying that if this is the nature of this kind of business and role, मैं तो नहीं कर पाऊंगा. And I really thought that that means I'm a failure, that I don't have the courage or the guts to do this. It was a wrong thing to do, but regardless of that, I mean, if you have to run a business, you have to run a business. And I just couldn't do it. And I said, if this is what is required to be successful in this kind of a business, how the hell am I ever going to do it? And I'd raised a lot of capital. We had raised $200 million and we were deploying that in India and buying land and building hotels. Exposure to a large amount of capital. हमने इतना सारा debt ले रखा था hotels को बनाने में, and suddenly I said, I'm so out of my depth in this that I said, it was the worst decision of my life, and I would have quit immediately, except that I didn't have a job. And I said, now what am I going to do? I have to go back. And one of the things I never wanted to do was ever look for a job from a position of weakness. People's careers get derailed because of that. You must always look to move on to the next big thing while you're still on a high of what you're doing. You should never be forced by circumstances to go and look for something else to do. I've seen enough of it happen to friends of mine, close friends of mine. And so I was at least smart enough at that time to realize okay, this isn't something I can do. I don't have the guts to do it. I don't have the wherewithal to do it. It's just not, but I'm in the business. Dal mein phas raha tha main. And I just said, I have to find a way of extricating myself. It was again, everything happens for a reason. In that job, we had to tie up with an international brand for our hotels, because the business model was that we will buy the land and build the hotels, but we will have international 4-star hotel brand operate, because we were building business hotels. And so, because of my past experience, I was connected with all the brands from IHG to Hilton to Hyatt to Starwood to Marriott, sabse baat ki. And we finally signed our first portfolio deal with Starwood for 4 Points by Sheraton, because that was the brand at that time they were willing to give on a franchise for a third-party company to manage. A company which in those days was called Interstate Hotels, JHM Interstate. The Rama family, they had invested in the Duet Fund, and the agreement was that with that investment in the fund, they would have the first rights to manage hotels. And because they were managing hotels for Starwood and Marriott in the US, they thought they'll bring that model into India. But I think third-party management was a bit ahead of its time in those days. I'm talking about 2008-9. So it was just that in talking to Starwood, at that point in time, they were looking to change their head for India. उससे पहले 2-3 मेरे predecessors सारे गोरे थे. And by that time, Starwood was really trying to get a foothold into India. We'd signed all those Westins in those days. So it was a big story for us. And I think somewhere up in corporate headquarters, there was a realization that we need an Indian to run our business. We can't just bring in an expatriate and expect him to build relationships with owners and all that kind of stuff. And so on one of the visits, the CEO of Starwood Asia Pacific, who became my boss, Miguel Ko, he was in India, and the head of development of India, who was the guy I was dealing with in Duet, a guy called Nick Mancharam. Nick said, Dilip, come and meet Miguel. He's here, and we're very excited about signing this deal with you guys and all that. So I met Miguel, and I think the next day, Nick told me, hey, he wants to see you again. So when I went to see him again, he said, I think you're on the wrong side of the table. You need to come and work for us. And I tell you, to me, it was the dream job of my life.
Wow.
I wanted to get out of this real estate part of the business. I spent 3 years in it. So I had a good understanding, raising capital, deploying capital, projects, all of that kind of stuff. Fantastic experience, however much I didn't enjoy it. And so here was a guy telling me, come and work for us. And, we want you to lead Starwood. These are our plans. So I said, wow, something right I must have done where God is kind of guiding me into the right way. I wanted to get out of this. I couldn't have found a better opportunity. And that's how my Starwood career really happened. But the experience of what I didn't find a good experience actually was my greatest success in Starwood, because now I could go to an owner and tell him, sir, मैं आपका दर्द समझता हूँ कि मतलब आपने इतनी महंगी ज़मीन खरीदी, आप इतना कर्जा लिया है, मैंने भी ये सब किया है, मुझे मालूम है इतना भी. It just gave the owner that much more comfort to know कि यार ये समझता है मेरा दर्द. And I told him I would give the same examples of what challenges you're going through. Approval नहीं मिल रही है, ये delay हो गया है, उसको घूस नहीं खिलाई, whatever it is. But the moment I thought, which is why, we were able to sign so many hotels. Because every time, we had a development head whose job it was to go and find hotels to sign. But he would always say before a deal would close, he said, Dilip, you'll need to meet the owner. And normally, yes, the owner would want to meet whoever's finally going to run his hotels. But in this case, it was for the owner to get comfort कि मतलब आप पे मैं भरोसा कर सकता हूँ ना, आप मुझे वो confidence. So many of our owners today, they will tell you the same story. They said, we would have signed with a Marriott or with a Hyatt or with anybody. We signed with Starwood because तुम्ही ने हमको ये तसल्ली दी कि तुम्हें मालूम है मेरा दर्द कितना है और मैं तुम्हारे साथ
That's
हूँ।
amazing. We need to do this.
That's the way you have to because in those days and even now, owners, firstly, many of them come from real estate, right? Hardcore real estate. Or they're from a business where they made money or landed property hai historically, to wahan hotel banana hai, but they have no clue about actually what the business is. Even real estate developers don't, because they built residential and commercial. Building a hotel is a whole different ballgame altogether, right? The model itself is so different. So there, when you're able to empathize with the owner and all the challenges he will go through, and convince him to sign that very onerous management contract, which is totally loaded in favor of the operator. I mean, if you see a hotel management contract of any international brand, it's literally telling the owner कि
signing of your life.
you're मतलब तुम्हारे होटल में दफ्तर तक नहीं मिलेगा.
Correct.
Literally, और तुम मतलब जब पैसे बनेंगे तुम्हें मिल जाएंगे, वरना तुम ही डालते रहना पैसे. Literally like that, right? Now, convincing an owner of that is not an easy job. And so you had to go through it. Sir, मैंने भी इनके साथ ये
पैसे भी
किया
हम
था.
चेक भी हम ही साइन करेंगे.
हाँ, सारे एम्प्लॉय भी तुम्हारे ही नाम पे हैं. कुछ हुआ तो तुम्हारा वो. We are just agents, right? But I think that was in many ways, I would say, a part of the Starwood success story, that we were able to grow and sign so many deals and hotels in those years, because I always had this empathetic view with my owners, which gave them a little more comfort with us even now.
So like you were saying that the meeting with the CEO of Starwood Asia Pacific sort of would have been one of the meetings that changed your life. Can you tell us about a book that's had a profound impact on your life?
So, many years ago, I used to work for Holiday Inn as a brand. Those were the days before IHG. It was called Holiday Inn Worldwide. 1995, it was my first general manager's job in opening the Holiday Inn in Pune. And the year that hotel opened, I was selected to go to the US for 3 months as a Rotary Scholar. And I lived in Missouri. And one of the people who hosted me and I stayed with, he took me to Memphis, where this gentleman called Kemmons Wilson lived. Kemmons Wilson was the founder of Holiday Inn. He started the brand Holiday Inn in 1952 and had retired by that time. But because I used to work for Holiday Inn, this host of mine wanted to surprise me, and he took me, this guy, and he gave me his autobiography, which was called Half Luck, Half Dreams. And it's a story about how Holiday Inn was founded. And it's a classic story. In the 50s was the US's biggest expansion phase, right? Post-World War II, the big reconstruction happening, the interstate highways were being built, all of those kind of things were happening. And this guy, Kemmons Wilson, took his family on a holiday, driving around the US. And he says, I couldn't find a decent place to stay the night because we were crisscrossing America. These new roads had been built or were being built, the interstates. But, we would travel in the day and we had to stay somewhere at night. And there were these seedy inns and places like that. And he says that's where the idea came, that where can a road traveler, get a clean room, get room service, have a phone in the room, have a bathroom, things which, we take for granted now. And he took me through this entire story of his, and he says, this is what, I've captured in the book. And because I'd met the guy and I heard the story from him, and then I was able to read that same story and how he articulated it, that book had a very profound impression on me as, what an entrepreneurial hotelier did and how could he think so big. 1952 mein Holiday Inn started with that one hotel, and in 20 years, I think there were 3,000 Holiday Inns.
Still the largest brand in the world?
Still the largest individual single brand in the world. So that was one of the earliest books which had a very strong impact on me. But generally, autobiographies of great hospitality personalities have always excited me. So Dare to Dream is a book of Rai Bahadur Oberoi's autobiography. I think we have it somewhere here. That book pretty much was like a Bible for us. Then I'm forgetting the name, but the book on the autobiography of Captain Nair was another great book to read. Because, these are very inspiring stories of people who could make it so big and create brands which you see today. And you always wonder, what would take these guys and what kind of strength and conviction they must have had to be able to do this, both in Rai Bahadur's autobiography as well as Captain Nair. It comes out really well. And then I always encourage students, I said, any hotelier's autobiography is worth reading. I mean, a hotelier who's made something of themselves. Conrad Hilton's book, Isidore Sharp book. So those are the kind of books which have had profound influence on me. Personally, I'm a huge fan of science fiction. That's what I read. I love reading science fiction because it just allows me to explore and imagine life where all the tech we can think about today is actually there, embedded, used. We've traveled the stars, we're doing kind of things. So when you read sci-fi and you think about something in the future, anybody who's written it is written it thinking of some tech being used there, which either exists today or at least we're talking about it today.
Or will exist in the future, absolutely.
So if somebody's talking about faster than light travel, we talk about it today. We haven't yet discovered it. But if you're thinking about life on another planet, पहुंचने के लिए मतलब faster than light travel हो गया, right? And so how is life in that kind of, so those kind of things have always fascinated me. I was a huge fan of the first Star Wars trilogy when it came out. When did it come out? In the 80s. The first of the Star Wars. This is before you guys were born also. And so that kind of really whetted my appetite for sci-fi and space and all those kind of things. So I remain a very avid reader. My reading habits are interesting in that I read off a Kindle, and I'll almost always have at least 3 to 4 books open at the same time. So my regular reading before going to sleep is science fiction, which I love. But there'll be enough books. Some, if I want management gyan, I'll have a book open on that. I'm now reading something by a guy called Peter Navarro, who's a big Trump aficionado. He writes about, because everybody wants to know about Trump. This guy wrote about some of the predictions about what will happen. So you read about geopolitical things, something to do with technology, something to do with entrepreneurship, leadership. People tell you, so rather than go and look for a book, today is the easiest thing. You just, go to Amazon and download it on my Kindle. So I genuinely have 3-4 books open at the same time. So for example, I've been reading Homo Sapiens, for about over a year and a half now. I probably read on an average a page a day. I don't read it every day, but some days mood ki baat hoti hai. When you want to be, thinking a little more philosophically, I'll go into that book. I've just heard something about some kind of tech, I'll go and open something else. So I find that a great enabler for me in terms of, I'm a voracious reader. I'm not a big fan of watching TV. I'd rather read than watch the screen. And so when you're able to read multiple books on multiple topics, all available to you on your fingertips, that's a great way for me it de-stresses me too.
I think, would you like me to?
Yes, please.
Should I do the rapid fire this time?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for giving me the honor. So this is Anant's Anand's special rapid fire, which he's allowed me to do. So, if ISH was a hotel, what would its tagline be?
Disrupting your stay experience.
Your favorite hotel?
I'd have to say the Rambagh Palace.
Wow. Yeah. Me too.
Well, I'm biased because I ran that hotel for some time, but I just have just such awesome memories of that hotel that it has to be my favorite.
One moment in your career that you would relive?
One moment in my career that I would relive. So back in 1997, I was awarded General Manager of the Year. 1997, we're talking about 30 plus years ago. Today, though, there are hundreds of awards which people, but in those days, there was one HNFS, Hotel and Food Service, was the magazine. Well, एक ही awards होते थे. They were like, the FHRA awards were called HNFS. So I was awarded the General Manager of the Year. I was the new General Manager, first time General Manager of the Holiday Inn in Pune. So I think that moment was probably the most significant at that time. You know, because you were a big fish in a small pond. Pune was a small city, yeah. And I'd come from Bombay, so, you know, Oberoi's ke baad, ye Holiday Inn mein. But then when you got that award and it became such a big thing, the whole city got to know about it and all that. So I guess that was a very exciting
Favorite
moment.
holiday destination?
I'll have to say Maldives.
Is it?
Well, you know, in my Starwood days, I traveled to Maldives every month because we ran hotels there, which were, Maldives was part of my beat. And I only traveled there for work. People would be shocked. He says, "Tu har mahine Maldives jata?" I said, "Haan," but I would go for 24 hours. I'd be on a seaplane more than I would be actually in a hotel. And so I always knew that I wanted to go and enjoy the islands for a holiday. So when I was able to take my family and go there on a pure holiday and not on work, I tell you, it was just the most, it was the ideal holiday for us.
One advice to your students and to us for us to wrap up?
Well, I think to my students, my advice has always been, and it won't change even to you guys, that I think the way to lead your life is to wake up every morning and think, in which way today am I a better version of myself and who I was yesterday? The smallest of changes you see in yourself allows you to know that you're working towards a better purpose. So for the students, my message is that in every way, make the strongest effort you can to be a better version of yourself. And that's the same advice I'd give you guys too.
I want to thank you for doing this with us and for Anant for inviting me to be a co-host with you. It's really special for me, especially because I've known you since I was 6, and this is really like coming full circle.
Thank you. Thank you. Delighted. It was
Thank you
great
so
fun.
much. It was a great learning, and I think we'll take a lot away from this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you for having me on your show.